Hi, Ivan Eiler here of Hammer and Hand Custom Cycles, and I'm here to introduce you to our custom pillion pad kit. Now we're going to be showing you a few differences between this and our leather seat kit. You're going to learn all the tricks of the trade from the How to Make a Hand-Tooled Leather Seat DVD, but when it comes to lacing this up, there's a few subtle differences, and I'm going to explain those to you now. So once you've got your top all tooled up and ready to go, what you're going to want to do is get it soaking wet again. And you're going to want to get it wetter than last time, because what it's going to do is it's going to help to wet form the leather over the foam rather than just crush the foam down in sections. So if you take a look at the profile of the seat, what you're going to see is that it curves down, and that's to make it fit the fender. Where other seat curves up at the back, it's not as much of a stretch for the top. On here, especially towards the ends, you're going to be pulling the leather a lot more than you would on the other seat kit. So what we're going to be doing is trying to stretch that down and make the seat turn out right in the end. How we're going to do that is with some leather lace. This is just a cowhide lace I'm using here. You wouldn't need this. String, anything would work. The whole idea is every fourth hole we're going to be putting one of these in to help pull the seat together and form it before we even start lacing it. And you're going to want to start one on one end and one on the other, because that's where you're going to be stretching the seat the most. Once we've got the one end tied, we're just going to flip it over and clip a little angle on the end of this to help me thread it through. And here you want to make sure that you're lining your seat up right. You can count the holes if you want to, but basically if you get this thing off a little bit to one side, then as you go to lace this up, you're not going to be able to lace it up right. So you want to make sure as you're doing it that you start right the center hole on the top and the bottom, that you got them lined up right. And you're going to want to pull this tight. Here's where we're starting that wet forming, that stretching. You want to make sure that you get this nice and snug. Gonna have a party, gonna raise the moon. The whole point of doing this is to help form the seat before we even start lacing it. If you just start lacing one end and just try and make your way to the other end, you'll find that by the time you finally get to the other end, the leather isn't going to fit together. So here you can see we have 3 holes in between each piece of lace. A few more on some of the side parts where it's nice and straight and we didn't need too much. Now I had to leave this overnight, and so what I did was I untied the strings. If you leave those tied up like that before you lace it, what'll happen is you'll end up getting puckered sections. But you don't have to go ahead and pull all the strings through. You just want to untie them so they're ready to go. Now I'm just getting the leather all wet again to help stretch it back into place. Okay, so to begin lacing this, what we're going to want to do is make sure that our leather isn't sandwiched like parts of the other seat kit, but that it actually comes down and meets the top of the bottom section. So it's going to be coming down against the edge, and you're going to want it like that all the way around the seat. Just like you can see it here. Now, when you get your lace, you want to grab the 2 ends of it and pull it together to find the middle. And once you do, you just give a little snip, and now you have 2 sections of lace. Now I've already done that, and I have my needles hooked to my one side of lace, and I've got the other half of my lace with the needles attached to that as well. So now we're ready to begin. We're going to do that by untying one of our little holders, and we're going to use this as our starting point for our lacing. So as you do this, you want to make sure that the top grain is on the right side. And just lace it straight through. Again, grabbing both ends together and pulling it through our fingers so that we can make sure that we're starting our lacing from the middle of the lace. And then we're just going to take the one that is on the bottom and put it through the top, and the one that's on the top and put it through the bottom. And what we're doing here is a basic cross stitch. There's a lot of different ways you can stitch these up, but this is a really attractive looking way to do it and pretty common, so this is what I'm going to show you today. And once you get those in there, you want to make sure you get it pulled nice and tight, because this is what's going to hold it together for the rest of our stitching. Now, as you start to stitch, you can put down just the bottom one first, but you don't want to do this too far. You know what? Good rule of thumb here is to basically untie little holders as you go, run your lace through where you just had it, and use that as your stopping point before coming back through with the other lace and putting the top cross on. Now the reason you want to wait before just going around it with the one before putting your cross on is because the leather can actually shift to one side if you only put the one stitch in, because it'll pull it in that direction. So coming through and putting the other cross stitch in helps keep that from happening. And then once you get that far, you take your other half of the lace and start in the same spot that you started your other one. Basically just poking it through the same hole. Again, making sure that the top grain of your kangaroo hide lace is facing the right direction. Now as you're going through and putting the stitches in here, you want to look and see which is your top and which is your bottom. The reason for that is because if you do it in the opposite direction, you'll be able to tell where you've started and stopped. So as you can see here, you can't tell where you've stopped or where you've started. Everything just looks seamless. So as you can see here, we're starting to get this triangle effect. If you look at this side, our top lace and our bottom lace are straight with one another. The holes line right up like they should. Whereas on the other side, it's kind of pulled away a little bit. Now if this starts to happen, you can start to pull on the top, but you shouldn't need to do this too much, because when you run your other cross, it'll help pull it in the right direction. If your needle gets stuck, you can always use a pair of pliers. Good thing to have on hand while you're lacing. Another thing you can do to help save time is lace large loops like this. And one of the reasons for doing this would be, as you go, you can tighten it down, hold it in place as you tighten down the next one. Generally what happens is, every time you let a stitch go, it loosens up a little bit, but past one stitch back, they stay nice and tight because the leather's grabbing itself. So by doing this, you can make sure that the last stitch that you landed on stays nice and snug. Now you can see we've gotten all the way up to our end, and once we've gotten there, what we're going to want to do is put our lace through loose like I just showed you, but you want to do that with both the top and the bottom, not tightening one down before you get to the other. Now once you get to the middle of the end of the seat, you want to put your needle just through the one side of the leather instead of running it through both. And you can see that here. I've got my needle coming right in between the two sandwiching pieces of leather. And then what we're going to do, once we've got our last loop pulled through, we're going to take that needle and lace and run it right through our loops. And then you go back through and again, like I said, run your top loops loose as well. And then same thing, pop it through the one side and then bring it right up through the middle just like the other side is. And then you want to make sure that you're keeping the leather in between the top and the bottom. And then begin tightening down only the bottom, just like we were doing before. And this can be a little tricky with all these big loops in the way because it's hard to see exactly what one you're pulling on. But if you just pay a little attention, and as you go to pull one, you'll see which one's the right one or the wrong one anyways. It just seems a little more confusing than it is. So there we got one of our bottom ones tightened down. Our leather's down in between the top and the bottom sections. And you continue doing this all the way till you get to the end, and then grab the end of that lace and pull it tight, and that will pull down and snug up your last loop. And then we go through to the top ones and start pulling them down the same way. And again, once we get to our last loop, just get it nice and snug, and then grab the other end of the lace, pull that down as well. And what this is going to do is this acts as our knot. The friction that the leather has on itself will actually lock it in place. And here we've done both sides, and all we're doing is just clipping off the excess. And then you're going to want to push the lace down in between the top and the bottom of the leather. Now what I'm using here is a little stainless steel spatula, and it's not necessary to use one of these. A little piece of a popsicle stick would work, or whatever you got laying around, a handle of a spoon. And once you've got that tucked away, then the end of the lace where we've clipped it off disappears. We've got no knots, we've got no bumps from knots, and you can see you have a nice seamless stitch. Can't tell where it starts, where it ends. Continuous and uniform all the way around the edge of the seat. And as long as you made sure as you went that your top came down and met your bottom right, then that is exactly what you'll have. Nice, clean, uniform looking pillion pad. And you can't beat the feeling of knowing that you did it yourself. From here all you need is a little bit of dye, and that's it. You're off and running. Only now maybe, hopefully you got somebody back there and you're not as lonely as you were before. Thanks for watching. And if you've already gotten one of our pillion pad kits, I hope this helped you out. And if you haven't yet but you plan to, then I hope it helps you in the future. To everyone out there doing their own thing and enjoying every minute of it, happy building.
Bills, nails, man, lining all their pockets with your dreams. Working